welcome to another show of TNFro is Reading. I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. This is the beginning, hopefully, of a better week than the shit show that was last week. I'm broadcasting from my home on a wonderful Sunday afternoon, early evening, and I hope that the tidbits of information that you get, you will find uplifting and entertaining. In this week's episode, there's been so much inspiration to allow me to continue to write, and I will be sharing with you some of my scripted things that I've actually posted on my blog, Dale's Angels Inc. What I've actually have been watching, my dissection of Issa Rae's Insecure, as well as what I'm reading. I actually received, it was like Christmas when it started off with my receiving of Andre Leon Talley's new book, Chiffon Trenches, and to some of my other readings from Sinclair Lewis and the writings of Martin Luther King. So this week is going to be the start of an eclectic mix of things that I'm reading, writing, and watching, and I hope you will be just as entertained as I have been in doing these things and then bringing them to you and presenting them to the audience. And again, thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy it. So I guess the third time's a charm. I've actually just recorded what I thought was at least 8-10 minutes of my episode, This Nerd is Watching, and realized that it wasn't recording or it wasn't picking up this narrative of this part of the show. This past week, in addition to dodging the news and the stupid shenanigans from the White House and this illegitimate administration, because they crazy, y'all, I have had the opportunity to watch some very good TV. One of my guilty pleasures is watching and keeping up and dissecting Insecure. And you can actually watch to the end of this the Wind Down, as well as other podcasts of the Black Man Who Tips, and even Demetria and the Ratchet and Respectable. They all discuss this show. This is a young woman that is putting out great content that entertains and also educates. The previous episodes have been, it seemed like they've been just greatly written, attention to detail, location, and just excellently produced. And I'll get to that, and I'll actually be commenting on that because I usually have to watch it twice. I did take some notes on my original watch, and I'll deconstruct it and how I was struck by some of the theme of this particular episode. But in addition to that, I've had the opportunity to also watch Rebel Wilson and Anne Hathaway in Hustlers. I didn't think I was going to like it, and yes, it was a little bit silly, but I do like the funny physicality of Rebel Wilson. She's like a British Amy Schumer. And I don't know if she gets paid as much as that comedian does, but she just makes me laugh because she gets herself into these situations that remind me of Lucille Ball, and she just takes it to a whole nother degree. And then, I don't know, Anne Hathaway, I try to like her because I think she gets a bad rep, but she's just that skinny bitch that people gonna hate. So I was not so enthralled with her performance, but it would just, I think Rebel Wilson actually carried this particular movie. Sorry, girl, I just don't like it. I also had the opportunity to watch Ben Stiller's movie that just reminded me of, oh, what is that dude's name that married his adopted daughter, Blue Sapphire. I can't remember, but it just reminded me of that, so I didn't think that was all that funny. Um, but that was uh, Flirting with Disaster. I also watched a movie that actually surprised me on the depth and how good it was. Um, with Elizabeth Taylor, and I realized until she was almost, oh, well, probably well into her 60s, and how good she was. And I was absolutely shocked by just how well she did that movie. Vampy starlet who's losing her gleam with Mark Harmon of all people, and it was just I thought it was just a well done movie, but I can't remember the name of it. But go to Prime Video and look up Elizabeth Taylor, and it should pop up. I have been watching, um, which actually shocked me, because I was into royalty at one point, in particular Russian royalty and queens. I like, bad bitches over the ages doing great shit. And Catherine the Great of Russia is just that one, the Empress. And she basically um, pulled Russia kicking and screaming into a modern age, and she doesn't get any credit for it, which I think is just resoundingly crazy. It's called The Great. You can actually get it on Hulu. It's the entire season one. It's kind of a satire because her husband, who definitely is the son of Peter, the legitimate son of Peter the Great, but there's no way he is great at all. He is a complete moron, a complete waste of skin. He reminds me of their current ruler, as well as um, our president, just a degenerate. Um, and what is this? Did I read? Did I watch this? I can't. A willing, graceful goodbye. Yes, I actually did watch this. This is when you know you watched basically too much TV, because then you can't remind me. Oh no, I did not watch this. This is a retrospective of show clips, past and present episodes that highlights, because the series actually went off the air. The last airing was back on the 23rd of March. Excuse me, of April. And how long ago that seems with everything that's happened in the past 2 months. But I did not see this retrospective, and that's what I'm actually going to watch probably later on today, after I watch again and make comments on this episode of Insecure. But what struck me about the Great was just again the majesty, and just how much society will tolerate from their leaders because they make up a certain mold, and how petty even the most powerful people are, and how they are starved for approval, and how you have to stroke their egos. I find that in itself to be that just kind of blew my mind. But it's a great watch. And again, it's called The Great, and you can actually binge watch that on Hulu. I'm up to episode 13. I'll probably get through that the rest of this week. If you are an Anglophile or Russianophile like I am, you will probably know some of the stories that they're actually speaking of and some of the lies that they actually make fun of, and how I did not know that her copulating with a pony was actually a lie, like a vicious rumor started by one of her player hating women in waiting. Oh my God. And it just makes for great TV and great drama, I should say. Really well written. I thought was actually really well produced, um, and I can only hope to have those writing chops. So now on to Insecure, episode 8. So we were all introduced to the Issa and what is his name? Why am I so bad with names all of a sudden? This is Lawrence of it all. 2 years ago, when this show actually started, and they have been now broken up for a while. Have been through a couple of different relationships. The last being that imploded was Condola. And it is weird seeing them. The focus of this particular theme of the show is old friends, and how far they've become. They've become really amazing people apart. Issa in her beginning of her new career as a promoter and a social promoter, and then Lawrence finally in his career in IT and making apps, etc. So now they're experiencing the experiences that they could have as great people. Now they're like feeling them each other out. And one of the scenes right now is they had to leave this really loud bar where, of course, Lizzo's songs "Why Do Men Having to Be Great" came on, and that was the testimony to their life and their relationship, because their relationship was whacked. Even the sex was whacked towards the end, and that's one of the reasons why Issa cheated on him, or the character cheated on him. So now they're back, and he wanted to talk to her to express his feelings and seeing her, and it's now that they've both matured enough to want to potentially explore the new person that they are now. But I think they're not the same people. And would the new and improved Lawrence and the new and improved Issa be able to get together in some type of state and to be able to survive a relationship? Therein is the question. But that all gets thrown out the waste, out of the way, out of the window with sautéed squash blossoms and a whole bunch of alcohol. So we're gonna see what happens next and what I actually feel about that. So before they experience Art Walk, which kills me that type of thing is experienced in Inglewood. I wonder if they have that kind of stuff in Chattanooga. But anyways, they meet one of her TSA boo, which I think is just completely hysterical. And again, they are experiencing their new world as their new persons, as the new Issa and Lawrence, which I think is hysterical too. So I can truly say that I have never had this experience with any of my exes. It's like they all blew away in the wind. Even the hookups, when you don't bother to clean your house, that just is crazy to me. But if you're nothing but a hookup, why would that be a moment for cleaning up some shit? So, and then they hook up as the new Lawrence and the new Issa, but they've fallen back into their old pattern, so some things don't change. It just seems to me that this character, Lawrence, always has this confused, duh look on his face. It's not that he's not handsome, he just has that same goofy look on his face. And Issa is just so expressive. So, I don't know. It's crazy. It just seems that it was the commingling of two very comfortable and surprisingly agile friends, which I find kind of amazing to a certain extent. It was not that awkward, like walk of shame that you would expect from people that didn't know each other. I just made a chicken Mexican on the hills. And it's just like this was the last hurrah before they both move on to the next stages in their life. But we know in Hollywood that things are just not that simple and that free. It is one of those things that happens, but they're going to work out. I've heard chatter online about the Condola character being knocked up, but who knows? And we also know that HBO has ordered another season, but I'm waiting to find out the last couple of episodes, how they're going to wrap it up in anticipation for next season. And Issa is just cracking me up how she just walks down the street with her heel boots past all of these landmarks in her hood like she owns the joint. And there's no shame at all to her game. And it just sets us up that she is completely satisfied. She gets to walk it out to her own theme song and allows the audience to be pumped again for the next episode. I think that's just absolutely genius. And it goes to show why this show is so highly rated. And how they were allowed to create such an amazing show. Again, that is my take on low-key happy. Just little things being happy. She didn't even get all bent out of shape that Lawrence probably is not going to be able to stay in Inglewood because his next episode, or the character's next episode, is not even in where they are now. And she's like, good. He broke her off. She going back to her house and still going to be planning on doing other great activities. I think that's pretty awesome when you think about it. This past week has been a roller coaster of emotions. From the continued protest over police brutality and continued racism and marginalization of a small percentage of the American public. The name George Floyd has become a global cry for equality. Also, during this past week, I've just had a flood of emotions that has taken me a minute to actually get out on paper. I continue to write my screenplay, Noir Reach, and I hopefully will be getting an update on the major rewrite of my Hamilton Heights screenplay in enough time to submit it for one of the writing contests. But I would like to take this time to basically read the post I have of my feelings of the protest and attribute my own personal tribute to George Floyd. Let's see, 2 comments. And I guess I've had several recent views of my Blackout Tuesday, The Message, and my WTF seriously couldn't get to Wednesday without dropping F bombs rant, as well as my sincerest tribute to Mr. George Floyd. So, here we go. Why is this taking so long to load? So I've always digged men in uniform, doing some straight up hero. This is why I took my oath um, serious ish in the crazy times when it just seems that the world is on fire. Chief R. Acevedo, that's the Chief of Police of Houston. Chief Andy Mills with Justin Cummins, I believe that's in Santa Clara or somewhere. Recognizing and acknowledging the pain of protesters and de-escalating, exemplifying well-trained policemen worthy of the shield. The Camden Police March in solidarity. Joe Biden saying the right thing, acknowledging the pain and the right to peaceably assemble. He acknowledges the pain of why people are protesting and why all of the unrest has come to such a violent head. Lawlessness and destruction are wrong, but he does understand. Uncle Joe came out of his basement to speak peace and words of healing in this topsy-turvy world. And to that, I say, go, Uncle Joe. And what is pissing people off? What is the message of all of this? Poorly trained policemen, large cities have bland neck restraints, and finally they outlawed it in Minnesota. Why did it take a murder and 500 applications later from Minnesota to figure out that this is not a good tactic? Failure to punish and not cover up poor law enforcement conduct in a transparent and expeditious way. Murder of black and brown people of color. Police presence in schools supply the school to prison chain, which I think is awful. The rather false appearance of well-being than justice and equality. A whacked healthcare system, ineffective education system, food deserts, and I think I need, because not desserts and deserts is one word, unemployment and poverty, and I couldn't pass by because people are still saying some dumb shit. White people spray painting Starbucks with Black Lives Matter. Stop defacing property because we will get blamed for it. Thanks, go home, Becky. We don't need that smoke. Chef David McAtee dies. Louis policemen turn off their body cam, the pus bags he used to give free meals to. Seriously, I have no words. And Katie Cruz, I hope the pepper spray burns. Facebook post before Chef McAtee death. Girl, bye. Then fired on unarmed protesters. Again, charges, please. You can't fix what you won't verbalize it. Racism exists. We all must do whatever necessary to eradicate it, point blank, period. And last but certainly least, clearing a peaceful demonstration by tear gas and bullets. So Bunker Boy can have a photo op with the Bible. We know you can't read. To stand in front of a church you don't attend is despicable. But when you are a narcissist degenerate, you will do stupidish like that. Your pattern of behavior supports your inability to truthfully speak understanding and healing. Because a classic narcissist sociopath, you are devoid of these human feelings. You are stirring the pot. Your words are not helpful. Your advisors really need to brief you on the legality of your threats to deploy U.S. troops nationwide to dispel peaceful protests, a direct violation of the First Amendment. And you can't activate the armed forces without the consent of governors. That's straight out of the language of the insurrection. The Insurrection Act, you stupid MFer. Dear Chump 45, we the American public, educated and sane, simply need you to shut the F up. Thanks, regards, TNFro, the unpoet. And next, but what I actually wrote following that in memory of the hero or the gentleman that his life ended and has stirred a final cause a call for uh, justice. Rest George Floyd. As for the rest of us, let's get busy. I'm tired of racism, just tired, said Rochelle Gray, a 58-year-old information technology specialist from Fort Washington, Maryland, who described the Saturday protests as beautiful, peaceful, and diverse. Yes, I jacked Arsenio's Hall catchphrase when he was the Black King of late night until he wasn't, but the statement is fitting as we grapple with the next steps as we move from protest to policy. We can't forget three great African Americans died and will be missed: Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. Because of Rona, their families' grief seems to be prolonged, but everyone, the society of the world, is grieving with them. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The length of time that a murderer disguised as a cop had his knee on the neck of a gentle giant. From everything that I've heard and read, this man was human and did not deserve to die. He would have been someone you would want to call your homie. He died at the hands of ill-trained, ill-tempered murderer that saw him less than. But the treatment of George Floyd has sparked a movement against the interaction of this black bad cop and everyone that sought to protect this bad apple. The cop that tried to keep the crowd back as George Floyd pleaded for his life, to those cops that knew something was wrong but persisted in still in doing nothing. There were so many epic fails on so many levels. And this is what makes me mad all over again. We have this young African American man who's set to make a difference in his family's life and his children's life, and no one will reap the benefit of that personal level because he died. Now his families and protesters have to be exposed to a virus that shows no signs of letting up. How many of us have to die before we all are clued into the message that racism has no place, that the brutality has no place in our society? Lawlessness and disregard for the law cannot be tolerated, and that's not the message of the protest. What is the message? First, the police cannot be criminals and should not be shielded from criminal acts. If they break the law that they're supposed to uphold, they need to be dealt with expeditiously. So the leveling of charges against all those terminated policemen, making sure that the charges are appropriate for the crime, i.e. possibly first, but definitely no less than second-degree murder, aiding and abetting a felony, failure to give assistance, and just for being dumbass cowards, all of those should be leveled against these men. Heads up for the policeman that ended the life of Manuel Ellis in Tacoma, Washington. They coming for y'all, I have a feeling. Ida B. Wells, Martin Luther King, John Lewis message, and the message now is recognize and fix continued wage disparity, continued poor housing, and access to safe housing, lack of access to good health care, access to healthy foods, large corporations polluting our environment, making us susceptible to Rona, to further marginalization. How crazy is that? I am reflective because I can. I know this is selfish and maybe considered lazy because that I am, and I can witness history from the comfort of my leather armchair. My life goes on simply because I wanted to. This sheltering place segregation from everyone is pretty much self-induced and supported by my current work situation. I'm very blessed that I get to work for a company that gave me this opportunity. I'm thankful for my day job. I'm actually pretty good at it, and it pays well and allows me to explore my passion. But I'm not crazy. I'm not going to say anything that's going to put that company on blast or say anything against the company. I'm not stupid. And I'm too fat, too lazy, and it's too hot for me to be protesting, so I'll do the next best thing. I'll talk ish and drag people online all day. So, there I go. Another what the F moment. If you have nothing positive to say, if you have nothing constructive to say, you need to sit down. So, here's a list of people that need a bag of gummy penises. What I'm excited about and gives me hope is people wanting to do what they say and to fix some things. Some things that they say are some things they say. Some things are said that are extravagant and crazier than others, but at least they're trying. Equally prosecuting dumbass behavior is a great start. So kudos to the mayor and chief of police, that fact that suspended those dumbasses that pushed over and made should have read this before I posted it. That 75-year-old gentleman bleed, and the rest of you dummies that resign and protest because these guys were disciplined for doing the wrong thing. What is that? Super woke cynics and barbershop philosophers, shut up and sit down somewhere. Removing the Robert E. And this is a statement that I didn't think this lady does not need to be governor of Virginia. Removing the Robert E. Lee statue is a cowardly capitulation to looters and domestic terrorists. So she's basically criminalizing the right to protest. Great. If the state is unable to defend a monument weighing several tons in a well-lit area, what hope do citizens have of the government protecting their houses and businesses? Instead of appeasing the left-wing mob, Northern surrender will only lead to future calls to erase founding fathers from public and our history books. No. Senator Amanda Chase, fact check. Robert E. Lee represents pain and oppression and dissolution of the Union. He is so not a founding father. If a symbol represents pain and a point of rage, why not move it? Again, you are part of the problem. Go sit down. Drew Brees saying that he called the national anthem protest disrespectful. He's an idiot. I don't accept his apology. Take a seat. You are part of the problem. Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, you're 5 years too damn late. And no, your collaboration with Jay-Z did not exonerate you from doing the right thing. Sorry, go ahead and take a seat. You need to take a damn seat too. Marina Sirtis of Deanna Troy fame going off on Lynn Miranda. Please, you need to sit down somewhere. He basically is an unobjectionable way to support the struggle that affects Black and brown people. If you were to expect him to say something deeper, that's not his stick. And who are you to sit in judgment if someone else chooses to verbalize his pain and support in a manner that he can? Again, you need to take a sit, and you don't get to basically orchestrate how he gets to produce and say his pain. I'm blessed, I am thankful, and I will keep writing. And plus, people keep saying and doing stupid shit. I'm going to have a whole bunch of stuff to continue to write for and have opinions on, because that's just the way I roll, and that's just how dumb people are. So anywho, I hope you guys enjoyed this segment. I definitely enjoyed scripting it. So I like to ask people how they spend their Sunday afternoons. Well, my Sunday, and pretty much the majority of this week, has been spent talking to friends on the phone, my sister and my friend Cheryl, slowly and sequentially cleaning up certain parts of my house, and I realized that there are certain areas that I don't even live in to the fullest, which is crazy. How it was just like early Christmas when a lot of the books that I bought from Alibris.com, including some well wishes from Martin Luther King from McCall's in A Gift of Love that I'll probably read later on in a later podcast. Babette by Sinclair Lewis and King and the Poor People's Campaign and Other Quests for Economic Equality, which will also serve as inspiration for probably upcoming blog posts. But all of those came within a short period of time. But one of the books that I was very much surprised that I thoroughly enjoyed was Andre Leon Talley's The Chiffon Trenches. How a over 6 foot tall Black man could rock out in a caftan and capes, and it was all his own personal style. And I really know that I am a fashion nobody. I don't eat, breathe, and sleep in Manolo Blahniks. I don't experience the world. I don't experience the world through fashion. I barely can match, and I prize comfort over anything. But what I was struck by how it he represented the superficiality, how superficial the world of fashion is, and when he grew too big uh, to be a example of the thinness of the fashion world, they put him out like last year's couture. The 298-page book was basic. It seemed to me to be that length of a the old school page 6 from the New York Post. And I mention that is because one of the things that I used to like before the pandemic is Sundays were searching and finding the Sunday New York Times with its style section and the single woman sports page with the wedding announcements and the travel section and the food section and the book review. I called up to my usual place, Barnes and Nobles here in North Carolina, and come to find out, number one, they're open now, but they have not received a New York Times since the world went on lockdown in March. Yes, I have access, and I actually pay for the online subscription to it of the New York Times, but it's just not the same. I like the tactile, the feel of the paper in my hands, and you can't get that with that same thing on my iPad. So that to me is pretty sad. The book itself, he dedicated to Reverend Calvin Butts of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in New York, and Lee Bouvier Ratsville, Jackie Onassis's sister. And he starts it out before the introduction, how I got over. My soul looks back and wonder how I got over. And in reading this book, I realized that this is how I'm going to take or talk about the book, is how I wanted and what I initially conceptualized for my podcast last year. Basically, reading a book all the way through, um, reading parts of the interesting parts of it, and hopefully having a discussion with somebody else. But I don't think anybody else has the time or reads, or I have none of my friends actually have the time or inclination to read and do the same thing and dissect it just like I have done. So in the next several minutes, I'm going to just talk about you should see this book, and I'm actually going to take a picture of this as the segue to this part of the podcast, because as I was reading, and it only took me like 3 days to read it. I do have like all these post-it notes through it with some of my thoughts on some of his writing. I did not know that ALT is how I'm going to refer to Andre Leon Talley in the subsequent pages, is actually from Durham. And I believe he grew up not even an hour and 15 minutes from my property in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He grew up and was born into the segregated Jim Crow South. He was raised in a household dominated by women. His great-grandmother, I think was she Pearl, and his grandmother, who he loved. He did not have a strong relationship with his mother, not until she basically passed away, that she basically let him in. And towards in the book, he basically comments on the fact that she didn't get him, he didn't get her, but he did admire her style. In 2018, the house that Andre helped build basically changed the locks on his ass. This is what I got in his introduction. When they hired him before a certain look and for his expertise in fashion. When he tried to flip that and commenting on when Beyonce made I believe the September cover of the book, and it strayed away from what they hired him for, as far as the superficial appearance and all the smoke and mirrors. They didn't hire him for depth, even though he clearly is a great writer. What I also found that some of the values that he learned and Southern sensibilities that he commented on, like treating others with kindness and caring for your neighbors and families, that kind of went out the door, along with those hand-stitched quilts that he abandoned when he moved to New York for the first time from Brown. And actually, I believe he got a master's in French culture, and he speaks fluent French, from what I understand, because of his education at Brown University in the Northeast. He basically commented on, he lived through significant parts of history. The assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of JFK, but all he could comment on was Jackie O's clothes. How he basically moved and operated through an expression of fashion. He did have the opportunities to work with the great Diane Vreeland, because he basically said that they spoke the same language of style, fantasy, history, and literature. And his relationship with Karl Lagerfeld, and to a certain extent with Anna Wintour, basically described that. As long as he could stay within that image, he was fine with both of them. He early on established his existence in a very narrow terms, and he's coming to deal with that. Some of the same people that he thought were his friends basically turned their backs on him. He also goes on to, I did not know that he also, in his early years, initially started out as a volunteer with Diane Vreeland, but he also worked, and who he thought was great friends with Andy Warhol, of all people. He tells a story early on in the book on page 20 to 21, how Andy Warhol gropes him. I do like how the book is laid out with spatterings of, we see the evolution of ALT, partying with Diana Ross, in his outlandish clothes. Even for then he actually had his own personal style. He felt that he came to think that his blackness wasn't important. It was his smarts that made it in. But it was also his lack of association with his blackness that basically, I guess, held him back, and how he could have basically grown. Why couldn't he had to come back south and be the Diane Vreeland and curator of the South Carolina Academy of Design? Why couldn't he have done that in his Vogue years, and when he worked for Vanity Fair with the blessing of Grayson? With, after she left, he was best besties with Karl Lagerfeld till he wasn't, but they saw him in such restricted terms that he did not get, until later on in his life, what he could have been doing. The same thing he did down south, could have done it in a bigger way up in New York. he basically was said he was put in the box. This is on page 138. And then they threw up the deuces. Karl Lagerfeld, oh God rest his soul, one of the biggest icons in fashion, lavish, sent him, was born into a great family, would send for him in private jets, lavish Louis Vuitton luggage on him, and then put him out to dry without explanation.
Yeah, Burnett. Miles Weber. I just heard about the cheese man on TV.
He was great friends with the crazy Naomi Campbell until this day. He actually survived and saved from HIV, from what he says, by being a prude. And now he's going to be taken out by a pan of peach cobbler because sweets are his thing. And he basically has ballooned up and does not represent the swell and thinness represented by the fashion world. We see later on in the book, and I mentioned when Renee Zellweger in her breakout role, and I love that vintage Hermes black crocodile purse, Kelly, that she showed up with at the Coco Chanel studios. She's actually pictured and features greatly, and I guess they're still friends. And I wonder, and I had asked this earlier on in the book. He basically was not allowed to grow. There was one point where he walked away from creative director from Vogue, and then he came back as they called him a contributing freelance editor. Now that Condé Nast, like the rest of the world, is convulsing from COVID, and because nobody's doing anything, you can't shelter in place and have these big galas. I was wondering why didn't he reinvent himself? Why didn't he's basically saying that Vogue is going to have to reinvent itself and come to some type of and then complain about the youth and these influencers and the people that are, because they can pay them a lot less, but because they can't afford the lavish lifestyles of yore that he and his contemporaries have enjoyed. He gets mad about how these influencers and people have destroyed the Met Gala, but it doesn't seem like he knows how to transition, and why couldn't he have led and been influential in leading them into the digital age? Making yourself indispensable in yesteryears, using yesteryear's tactics is not what's going to help. If that podcast could have been more relevant, talking and interviewing up and coming talent, continuing to do that, describing with great detail, and putting this as part of the blog posts and notes for the podcast, showcasing the new talents and some of the influencers and having them come up with like different spots. That is how you continue your relevance. But he basically sat back with his arms crossed and pouting, instead of not understanding why he can't have the same expense account. But when you're not contributing anything to the new and the bold, keeping your eye on the new and the bold in this transitional time, that is how you continue in your relevance. He doesn't mention any of that, but I just would love to ask him. He was actually on his way, I believe, to bestow some type of achievement award and lost control of his car. He almost died for fashion. Once he figured out that he had no broken bones, Then he wanted to make sure that his Louis Vuitton luggage didn't get soaked.
Sweetheart, I had no choice. But Rose, I want you to know.
And he spend a great amount of time, and he can't understand how he gets why he got the cold shoulder from Anna Wintour. And it was more like, how dare you treat me just like you treat everybody else. She has a pattern of behavior. There was nothing in her behavior after she dismissed him that explain why she would have allowed him to give his commentary, the same commentary or op-ed he wrote for the Washington Post. There was no way she was going to allow that to run in Vogue, because it was contrary to what they hired him for. Um, he's not. He is the arbiter of fashion and fantasy. He's not to speak on um, the deeper significance of Beyonce gracing the cover with the backdrop of sheets hanging in the background. That was more appropriate for the New York Times, maybe for the fashion, but not for Vogue, because again, that's not what they hired him for. And I'm so sorry. They want you for Vapid, and if you try to change up, they don't care how well written it is. That's why you have to save it for your book. Sorry. And again, his attention to the South, I did think I knew about his contributions to SCAD, because I had gone down there. I haven't seen any of his retrospective, and definitely have been invited to the award that they were given yearly in his honor to other fashion icons. But I did not know how long he had. Most of the time he basically is in White Plains, New York, but he bought his grandmother a house in Durham. He's been in Durham, and he taught these master classes and has curated several couture collections for the School of Design in Savannah. So I had no idea. The little black dress. And then he basically kind of berates himself for not including a black maid's dress. But again, nobody didn't hire you for that, Andre. Leave that up to a different publication. That would have been a mistake if you actually had. And since they canceled the Vogue, the official Vogue podcast, why couldn't he have an unauthorized Spilling the Vogue Tea podcast? And he still is having, when the last time that he was basically uninvited from the last Met Gala that he still was styling Anna Wintour for, and I believe he still was up until the publication of this book. I don't even think the Met Gala actually, I think it did happen this year. I think that was one of the last things I had read in the New York Times, but it was called Heavenly Bodies, and you yourself said you were extremely overweight and having health problems and mobility issues. Why would she have ever, in the world of fashion, been able to even invite you to even walk or stand on the stairs? He is still holding out for her, even on his deathbed, to basically say I love you and to tell him that she is sorry. Nah, bruh, I don't think she gonna do that. I'm so sorry and I feel bad for you, but she is not. That is reserved for people that are her, or if they're not her husband or boyfriend or her kids, you not gonna get that. That's just not gonna happen. But it's kind of how black of you and how queenly of you to think that she would step out of that. Not even for you, ALT. Not even for you. The book goes on and highlights some of the great people that he knew, to the last days of Karl Lagerfeld, to Lee Bouvier's last days. how Naomi Campbell was trying to get together an African Vogue, which I find fascinating. To Mark, his curating his relationship with Marc Jacobs and getting invited to that wedding, and how since he no longer goes to that, the demise of the Met Gala, meeting the Goodman sisters, and how in his new relationship with Grace Coddington, the cranky fashion editor for years, and how she was basically ostracized from Vogue and made a freelance. Rose, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm gonna miss you. You laugh, you smile, you St. Olaf stories. And this is one of the things in how, and as I said, if you are looking for a comment, a deep and meaningful commentary on the Black experience in fashion, this ain't that book. He's not a civil rights person. That was not his stick. This is a commentary about fashion and how even the best and the brilliant are turned out again like old fashioned and out of date fashion. But it's also a commentary on demons and how what motivates people. And definitely with ALT, what motivates him is a deep knowledge of history and the impact of fashion from through history, and how you can choose to live your life. A Black feminine homosexual male growing up in Jim Crow, North Carolina, how he became who he was to the pinnacle of the fashion world as creative director. Yes, he could have soared higher. He definitely made some wrong turns. He may have even played himself. But it does definitely make for a great read. And I think it's one of those books that I'm glad I read. Again, the struggle is real. And this is how one man carved out his identity in an industry that is not forgiving. And he did that in spades. I'm going to end you with one of his a quote on page 263 from his book. Personal style is outstanding when it's backed up by knowledge and confidence. Be confident, be bold, and use your voice to express that personal style. And I'm hopeful that in broadcasting or producing this segment of the podcast, I will become the reading podcaster that encourages other people to pick up a book, read it for understanding, read it for knowledge, and also don't be ashamed if it's actually definitely entertaining. And The Chiffon Trenches is one of those books. And I'm thankful that he was able to encourage me just through his words. Again, well written piece. It's not, and definitely I don't think it's literature, but it's definitely it's an entertaining read. And there you go. Well, that's it for this episode of Tennessee Fro's Reading, and I'm hoping you have enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed producing it. I want you to take 20 seconds of this last part of the episode just to breathe. Reflect on all the blessings that we as free Americans get to listen to and discover and expand our minds with knowledge. I want you to take the time to be considerate and kind to essential workers, whether they are the Instacart drivers that deliver your groceries, whether they are the worker handing you your Saturday or Sunday morning biscuits at Biscuitville. I want you to just to be kind to everyone else and to be kind to others, and definitely be kind to yourself. Do what is going to bring you peace, and do what is going to bring you joy, not at the expense of anyone else. And it's okay. This COVID is no joke. It's tough. The times are tough. And if you feel that yourself you are struggling, don't hesitate to reach out to people that could definitely help you, like the professionals at suicide prevention on lifeline.org/chat/. If you're having other issues with vodka and other chemical substances, dial 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357 for 24/7 help. Headspace is available free to anyone that has lost their job due to COVID. There's Doctor on Demand, and there's Talkspace. This life is too hard, and there's no way that you should struggle. Just reach out for help. The details of such are in the notes of this podcast. And I hope you will join me in upcoming episodes as I give you other hopeful words of encouragement from the ages, as well as things to entertain you, and hopefully something that will make you smile. And I hope you will start your week out blessed as always. And thanks for listening.